What's up, you fish hacks? Welcome to Tim's School of Fishing. Class is in session. Today, I want to review and give you a brief overview of an American-made knife that a subscriber and buddy of mine named Rich, aka Dick Ritchie, sent in to the channel. Sent me 5 or 6 USA-made knives that I had never handled and don't have. He sent them to me to review, and I really appreciate that, Rich. I will link his channel, which is called AOK Product Reviews, down in the description, and also pin it in a comment. You guys go subscribe to his channel. It's great. So today, we are going to take a look at the Case Kinzua. Pow! So, Case, all of you guys know Case and Sons Cutlery Company, also known as Case. So Case has been making traditional slip joint knives forever, and recently, about 2020, 2021, I guess, they decided to try their hand at modern folding knives, and this is one of the first ones that they made. This is called the Case Kinzua. This has a sloping Tonto blade on it. This is S35VN steel. This one has a nice stone-washed finish on it. We've got some nice jimping on the spine that goes almost halfway up the spine. We don't have a lot of billboarding on the blade. The only thing we have is the Case logo on one side, and then the name of the knife, Kinzua, S35VN, and USA on the other side. This is a flipper tab knife. The flipping action on this knife is outstanding. This is a frame lock knife, and the action on this thing is super sweet. The handle on this one is anodized aluminum. It has a nice neutral handle shape, so it's very comfortable in the hand. We do not have a forward finger choil, but we have a nice cutout here. We've got open construction with barrel back spacers in the back, which I prefer. A lot of guys don't like them, but I live in Florida and there's a lot of sand, and the barrel back spacer standoffs just make it easier to clean. It has T8 hardware on the pivot. It is a captive pivot. It also has T8 hardware on the body screws, and we've got T6 on the clip screw. So, like I said, this was Case's first attempt at a modern folder. They also had the Case Marilla, and that one won Knife of the Year. USA made Knife of the Year in 2020 or 2021 maybe. So, this is a good knife. It's not a great knife. And I hate to say that about Case, and I hate to be critical in any way whatsoever, because I think it's awesome that Case is branching out and trying to make modern folders, and I hope they continue to do that. And this is in no way bashing on Case, but if they want to be successful in the modern folder market, and I want them to be successful, they're going to have to make some improvements from what they've done on this. I think everybody in the knife community, every knife guy that I know would back Case 100%. This is a storied American company, and I know everybody would back Case, would recommend them highly, and wants them to succeed. However, if they're going to do that, they're going to have to make some improvements on this. So what am I talking about here? The flipping action is great. However, the closing action, this has a very late detent. So what that means is, if you look right there inside the knife on the bottom. You see that little ball? That is the detent ball. You see how far away it is from the blade tang? That's pretty far away. And so what happens when you go to close the knife, it gets hung up on that detent ball. That's what we call a late detent. So this is not a deal killer, and most people that own this knife would just do that to close it, or they're going to close it with two hands anyway. But most knife guys want to be able to close it one hand. One of the main purposes of modern folders is to be able to operate them with one hand. The companies that Case is competing against in this market have figured out the detent, and they usually don't have these problems. Now, you can overcome that late detent by, instead of pressing here, up here where the cutout is for you to press, you press on it a little lower down, right? So instead of pressing up here, because if you do that, you're going to get hung on the detent every time. The way to overcome it is to press the lock bar here. But then what happens is the blade falls right there on the back of your thumb. And nobody wants that. You know, you just have to kind of figure out that sweet spot where the flipper will fall on your thumb, but you can overcome the detent ball, that late detent. If it didn't have a late detent, you can see the drop shutty hydraulic action on that thing is fantastic. But that's a problem. That late detent is a problem. The other thing is this cutout is kind of strangely shaped, so it just doesn't fit your finger very well. If they had just widened this thing out, right, and made it more of a normal arch instead of that abrupt downward sloping thing, that would have been much better. Another thing is this clip. We've got this loop over style clip, which is okay, I suppose, but there's two problems with this clip. You can see that the bill of the clip lands right there in the relief cut. They could have angled the clip a little bit, or put the clip over here, or made the relief cut a little bit higher. So what happens is the bill of that clip lands right in that relief cut, and your pants get hung up on it all the time. What's worse are those screws, those big giant button mushroom screws. You see how high up they are off of the knife handle? Every time I put this in my pocket, the knife gets hung on that first screw. Every single time, because there's not enough clearance between the screw and the clip. So your pants get hung up right there, and the only way to do it is to just jam it into your pocket or reach over with your other hand and lift that clip. Most modern folders have flat screws right here that are, and some of them, a lot of them are recessed. It's milled out right here where the clip goes so that those screws sit down in the handle, but they certainly don't stick up like that. That's no good. So we've got the late detent ball, that right there. We've got the finger cutout, which is weirdly shaped, and we've got the giant screws on the clip. And the last thing is this blade geometry. That blade stock is thick, really thick. Going from this thick blade stock to the edge. And so what we've got here is a knife that's kind of thick behind the edge, because we started with such thick blade stock. We ended up with a blade that's thick behind the edge. So what does that mean? Why does that matter? It basically means it's not very good at slicing tasks. It's not the best cutter. I mean, we've got this great steel, S35VN, but because of this particular blade geometry, it's just not the best cutter. So these are problems that other knife makers that have been making modern folders for a long time, they had these exact same problems when they started out, right? We've all had knives that have this late detent. We've all had knives where the finger cutout is wonky. We've all had knives where the blade geometry is not great and so it doesn't cut very well, which is what a knife is supposed to do. It's supposed to cut and slice well. And we've all had knives that have this wonky clip or giant clip screws and it gets hung up in your pocket. But these are things that other knife makers have figured out a long time ago because they've been making modern folders for a long time, so they had to go through those growing pains and they figured it out, and Case just has to go through those growing pains, I think. But this thing is solidly built. It's made with great materials. The profile of this knife is awesome. The flipping action on this knife is awesome. The drop shutty action on this knife is awesome. They came really, really close, but they missed the mark by just a tiny little bit. Now, with all that said, would I recommend this knife? Sure I would. This knife is going to be perfectly acceptable for most people. Most people that just want a cool knife that's made in America, that doesn't cost an absolute fortune, they're going to be perfectly okay with that, with the late detent. I mean, the flipping action's great, right? They're not going to have any problem with the clip. But what I'm saying is just things that are going to annoy knife guys. If you're watching this, you know if you're a knife guy, and you know if you're just a casual person that has a couple pocket knives. But I feel that it's my responsibility to point these things out before I tell somebody to go out and buy it. I like this knife. I like it a lot. But there's a few little things that keep it from being a great knife. And I really hope that Case figures it out because everybody would support him. I would buy a ton of Case knives if they figure out these problems, right? I would have an entire collection of Case modern folders. There you go, boys and girls. The Case Kinzua. As always, I appreciate you guys for watching. I appreciate the thumbs up and the likes on the videos. I appreciate your comments. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. I really appreciate all your support. That's it for this episode of Tim's School of Fish, boys and girls. Class dismissed.